we've got to talk about giving back.
If we could talk a little bit about
Yeah,
philanthropy. I think with philanthropy, you don't have to be a billionaire, a millionaire, or anything like
exactly.
that.
Exactly. I'm ready for it.
I don't know if this is the right thing to say, Suzanne, if we're so much about me, and then the you is the blame on you type of thing.
Yeah, I
So,
think you're so right. And I love that you come right out of the gate with this because I think there's a lot of new evidence coming out of COVID. We were all kind of in our COVID cocoon, and human beings are built for connection. We're built to be mass of people. And so as a result of COVID, but also as a result of, our phones, we have gone more inward, and that actually isn't biologically good for us. And so actually having connection, connecting with people is part of not only the way we stay healthier, but it's also the way that we emotionally are happier. And so all of this kind of going inward was not good for us during COVID. Obviously, we did it for health reasons. And so now we are trying to really create kind of a new paradigm around people going out, reconnecting with their community, reconnecting with each other. And so that's really why I'm kind of on this crusade to get people outdoors and in their community and in their neighborhoods making a difference. Because it's so easy to just stay on your phone and doom scroll, but I want to hope scroll. I want people to be out there and realize how much good stuff is happening in their own community and what they can do to make a difference.
yeah, and the doom scrolling, I mean, I'm guilty of it. And I was going to say it's such a waste of time. And what I mean by the waste of time is your time is wasted because before you know it, it's not 10 minutes, it's been an hour. And you haven't gotten any further than when you started an hour ago.
It's so true, and all the research that has been done around your phones and the amount that they actually suck you in, even just the notifications that you get, while they are helpful to know when a friend has texted you or when you've got a post on Facebook, it actually, distracts you and it creates a lot of noise in your space. So it's actually harder for you to focus. And so it was interesting. I just saw on Good Morning America this morning that they've done a new study with just teenagers who have brought themselves down to just 30 minutes a day. And you can do that multiple ways. Your phone can actually time you and you can time out of social media, but they actually are happier. They're engaging more in their community. There's so many reasons. They're doing better in their homework. And so I think we've really got to, as I like to tell people, control the electronic leash because I think it's so easy to get wrapped into this world and not be in this world, the world that we actually live in.
Yeah. Um, well, like you're saying, it's a big social impact,
Mhm.
the little devices that we carry with us. But I was wondering too, from when you first envisioned doing this, what has changed from that first point to now? And then we can move forward.
I think the research has just become really strong. We have actually now seen the effects of technology on people and on our brains. And, in many ways, technology is fantastic. It is diseases, it's doing all of these wonderful things. But as many sociologists will say, this is our great maturity test as the human species. Are we controlling our circumstances so that way, we are connecting with people? And so the other thing, and this is kind of where my research comes in, we actually know that when we're connecting with people and we're giving back to our community, we get what's called a health life. And so you're not just helping the other person, you actually are doing things biologically to yourself where you're feeling better. And I have a 4T's framework that I walk through where it's not just your time, it's also your talent, it's your treasure and your testimony. So there's lots of ways we know people can actually give back. And it's highly beneficial to individuals. But the magnifying effect on the person you're serving and on your community is also, it shifts the perspective of a community in many ways. And so that's really part of what we're wanting to do is have people, break away from their phones and break away from their TVs and get back into their communities, get to know their neighbors and give back in their communities so that way they're building community and that community is stronger as a result of their efforts.
In your studies and your discoveries, have you found that a smaller town is easier to possibly make that change than it is a larger? It seems like it would be an obvious, but then I'm not really sure.
I think it really depends. I mean, small towns oftentimes have larger geographies between neighbors. And so they don't actually run into each other the same way you do in larger towns. So about New York and how many people you run into at the subway and at the grocery store. And you're almost having to have common courtesy just on a sidewalk because you're passing so many people. So I definitely, I mean, I grew up in the country. I jokingly say I'm a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll. And so there are aspects of the country I really like, which is when I drive past people, people wave at me. You know, they're very much connected to each other. So if something happens to a neighbor, they're diving in to support them. But it also creates an anonymity where you don't have to necessarily know your neighbor as a result, and you're not connecting with human beings. And so I think it really comes down to the person and you really deciding that it's important for you to give back and it's important for you to be a neighbor to your neighbor, to build back community. And I think that's something we all have to really make a New Year's resolution and try to do that. And so I have three things that I do, which I think anybody can do. So one is on Fridays, I have what I call Friday spots, where I look back on my week and I actually identify 5 people who have made a significant difference in my life. And so it could be in a small thing. Maybe, they sent me a really great email, or maybe they said something to me that I thought was really significant. And so I just text them on that Friday. And interestingly enough, it gives me a boost as well. And I usually do it at 9 a.m. So it kind of is my thing I look forward to on a Friday. And it's just a simple way of showing gratitude to people. And you'd be shocked like how many people respond back going, this just made my day. That you acknowledge that this thing mattered to you that I did. The other thing is that I try really hard to do the hope scrolling. So it is easy to fall in the doom scrolling category, but each of us with the T of testimony can identify people who've been doing good things. It's so much easier to leave a negative review versus a positive review on Yelp. It's so easier to get frustrated and post that this company did something that you didn't like, or this person didn't do something you liked. They have those epic fail sites. But what about an epic succeed site? Where you show people who have gone out of their way to help somebody else. And I think there are more of those things that are happening. Just, hope just doesn't have a good PR engine. The same way I think sometimes the epic fails do. And then the last thing I really recommend to people is just find a way for at least 30 minutes every single week to find a way to give back. And it could be just someone on your street that is homebound and you make extra food on a Sunday because you love baking like I do, and just taking something to them, like physically walking over to them and saying, do you need anything? So leaves are falling right now. So can we rake your leaves as well? That connection makes such a difference. And so it can be something small. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be something really minor. And that's what I tell people is just spend 30 minutes and you will get the benefits of it because you will feel better. And then it's the whole pay it forward concept. People will do these things for you too. And so I think those are the small things that I do every week and they make a big difference.
Can I add something to that as far as like the first thing that you mentioned? I mean, like gratitude and, listing off or naming off or writing down 5 people that made a difference for that week. I think a lot of times people will think, well, I can't think of 5 people or I can't think of 5 people every single week. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it has to be 5 different people every
Yeah.
single week.
I've texted old teachers of mine, that I basically said, actually, I was about to do this week, and I just want to be grateful for, you being my third grade teacher. And it made a huge difference to me that said this to me. And now look at what I'm doing in the world. And, so it doesn't have to be someone that did it within the confines of 7 days. It can really be just anybody who made a difference.
So that would mean a lot of people have 500 plus friends on social media. So could you go as far as saying something like sending a message saying, hey, I read that message that you posted a couple weeks ago and I thought that was fantastic. Thanks for doing that. Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's anytime you're doing gratitude, something that has stuck with you.
Okay.
And so I use random things with people. And so it doesn't have to be anything significant. It can just be a person. I have a local park that is adopted that I go to. And so I send a note of gratitude to the family that adopts that park and says, thank you for keeping it clean. It is so nice to come here and it is always spotless. And I get to enjoy the leaves falling and the flowers, and I don't have to see, cigarettes, beer cans, et cetera. And so it can also be anonymous, where it's just somebody who made a difference to you. It could be someone who checks you out at the grocery store and does a phenomenal job. and you go tell the manager, this person did a great job. So it doesn't have to be anything, dramatic. It's just somebody going out of their way for you and you actually in gratitude for that.
Well, I'll throw this in. If you're getting ready to travel and you're going through the TSA line, say thank you.
Yes, I agree. I mean, to me, I think that gratitude, I think, is very helpful. And then if, I love improv, so I would say yes, and just thank them for something very specific. Just say, thank you so much for what you're doing today. I can tell with your smile that you love this job. So instead of just saying thank you, go a little bit further and just acknowledge something that they're doing in their behavior that is significant to you.
Suzanne, they'll go, move along, please. Move along.
No, I've never had anybody who said that. They always just smile and they just kind of nod. But yes,
Yeah.
I think no one ever feels like they've been thanked too much.
I just want to throw out real quick, folks, I'm talking to Suzanne Smith, and you can find her the fastest and best way is meetsuzanne.com. And again, there's a lot of information that you have on your website. So continuing with all the social aspects and all these different steps that we can take. I think someplace on your website, you mentioned that something about architecture, the society, the change, everything is something similar to architecture.
Yes, and
Can you explain?
you
'Cause I
did
know
do
I'm
your
not doing a good
research.
job with that.
No, it's true. So my company is called Social Impact Architects. So part of the reason why I called it that, it's after a Buckminster Fuller quote, where we're called to be the architects of the future and not necessarily the victims. And I love the concept of architecture. In fact, I work with a lot of architects, and I love the way their brains work. And to me, part of social solutions is really thinking about how we architect a better world. And so the concept that I came up with is called social alchemy. And so essentially, what it does is it helps you really fall in love with the problem and not fall in love with the solution. So get to know what the community wants, get to know what the individuals need, and then you figure out kind of what the best solution is based on that conversation. And so in my classes, so I teach at a couple of universities as well as executive education programs. Part of what I try to do is back them up from the solution and really think about what is the problem we're trying to solve. And who do you need in order to effectively solve that problem at a sustainable level? And so that's really been the cornerstone of my career for the last years, is really not only figuring it out myself, and consistently getting better over time and creating new frameworks, but also teaching it. So helping future social entrepreneurs who are going out in the world have the power tools that they need in order to really create social change.
That's all to me, just listening to you say that is almost like a mind shift, mind change that I have to make because we're so used to hearing and going for what is the solution, the end goal.
Yes.
And we're always looking at that end goal rather than the problem part and solving it, going through those steps.
Yeah, I think it's just
Again, I might be far off from
it's a
that.
natural inclination to start with the solution. I think that's just a natural part. But even Einstein said, if I'm trying to solve for something, I spend 55 minutes getting to understand the problem and 5 minutes coming up with. And so, really, the best thinkers recognize that falling in love with this problem was a big part of coming up with the best possible solution. And so we use techniques, things like lean startup, very similar to what for-profit entrepreneurs use, where they do things like design thinking, actually watching people deal with the problem, actually figuring out ways that they could actually solve it better. So I'll give you a good example. So you recently saw all the headlines about the lines at food banks. So Toyota is a good example of a good corporate social citizen where they actually deployed a number of their workers who are very good at assembly lines. I mean, if they can put together a Toyota car faster than anything, they're known for their assembly lines and their concept of Kaizen. And they actually would go out to local food banks proactively and actually help them figure out how did they turn a long line into people getting their food in 2 minutes? How did they get a box packed in a shorter and shorter amount of time? Because the quicker you can go, the less volunteers you need, and the quicker it can get deployed. And so to me, this is where my research really shows there's this meeting at the middle. It's not just nonprofits who are doing better, but it is also for profits who are out there trying to also create social good.
How does one find or distinguish those good nonprofits?
It's
Because I social media with social media and everything else, I see so many nonprofit, nonprofit, nonprofit. No longer know which one is a good one or which one is a real one or true one or which one really benefits the end user or the end result.
Well, and I think to your point, there has been a lot of headlines recently where there have been nonprofits who have, I think, unfortunately hurt the trust of the sector. I would say the vast majority of nonprofits I work with, it's like any other thing, there is like a small group of people who are outliers, who are the bad actors that sometimes cause the problem. So what I typically recommend to people is one, they find a mission that they deeply love and deeply care about. So it could be maybe you had a family member who had a health condition, and so you want to give back in that area. Maybe as a child, there was a particular after school program or initiative that had a huge impact on you. So find something that you're directly connected to from a purpose point of view. And then start looking at the organizations in your local community that are very similar. And it could be a national organization, but I really encourage people to give locally so that they can actually see their dollars go to work. Because obviously, if you can actually have proximity to that dollar, that makes a big difference. And then, like I said, I really recommend that people actually don't just give their treasure, but they give their time and their talent to that charity as well. And of course, their testimony to really create that multiplier so that you really feel like you can get hands on with that particular nonprofit. And then you're going to see for yourself what the work that they're doing is and the impact that they're having in their local community. And you're able to give not only your dollars, but your talent. And then, of course, you can then give your testimony and talk about here's what's happening with this nonprofit and here's why you should be supporting this after school program or this school or whatever the case may be. And so, from my perspective, that's the way I recommend people find a nonprofit that they like, just like they find their favorite store, their favorite grocery store. You've got to get hands on in order to really know for sure that this is the charity that you want to be involved with for a lifetime.
It's on the ground, so to speak.
Yes, boots on the ground. If you do want to give to national organizations where you don't have the capacity to, there are organizations like Charity Navigator and others where you can go online. There are just like Better Business Bureau, there's also ones in the nonprofit space where you can get a sense of how they're doing. I would also encourage you to go to their website and read their impact report or their annual report, see what they're doing with their money. They should be very transparent with how they're leveraging their money. Hopefully they're tracking their data and you can actually see the impact that they're having in their community. So my recommendation is that maybe look at their board of directors too. And if you know someone on their board, it's probably highly likely that they're using those dollars for the benefit of the community.
Before I move on to asking you, why can't we solve these big problems? Because we're talking about a lot of things that are issues of big problems. We're
Yeah.
talking about nonprofits, whether they're small or large. I wanted to make a comment about doing these things, helping out the nonprofits and whatever it might be.
Mhm.
To me, it kind of all goes back to that gratitude. You end up feeling good about doing that. They have gratitude for
Yeah.
you. So it's an all around feel good thing. And again, you'll find people like-minded people. And if that's the way you want to build a community, you are within a community that you are joining or building. So I love all of this. So it comes back to asking, so why can't we solve some of these big problems like with healthcare, housing, and all that if we're all trying to be these philanthropists, good people, where's the problem? Why can't we
Well,
fix some of
I
these things?
always push back a little bit on people who say, why can't we solve the problems? Because one of the things I remind people about is in my lifetime, I think in your lifetime too, you probably remember a time very early on when you were a kid where there were no seatbelts and that people would smoke pretty regularly. In fact, my first boss, actually, we would have our updates and she would be smoking during those updates in front of me in an office. And so another issue that I think we have completely had a transformational effect on is drunk driving. And so, in my lifetime, in your lifetime, we have seen seismic social change where, people are living longer lives as a result of things like 911, getting to the hospital on time, and things I worked on when I was at the Heart Association. My uncle very recently had a stroke, and he's in his 80s, and it's because of a lot of the work that the American Stroke Association did. And I was one of those people who made it so that one, he got to the hospital on time, two, the EMTs knew about a drug called TPA and then took him to the exact right hospital. where he could actually get the imaging he needed so that his stroke could get diagnosed. And, strokes can virtually be reversed as a result of that work. And so I think the hard part is we want instant gratification, like we want instant change, and we don't see the incrementals that are happening over time. It's just the nature of us as human beings. But when I look at my lifetime and all of the things that have changed in my lifetime that I've seen, I have to remind my students and remind people that there has to be patience with strategy, and that it is up to us to really shift the narrative. And I'll give a recent example. So for me, I started out in the nonprofit space in the mental health arena. The fact that today we have, people who say, talk about their mental health diagnoses. It's okay to not be okay. We have a Prince of England who talks about his mental health issues. I mean, that never would have happened 20, 30 years ago. And so to me, I think we just have to continue to remind ourselves that human beings evolve slowly, communities, societies evolve slowly. And there are mechanisms, and these are the mechanisms that I teach in my classes that we used for seatbelts, that we used for drunk driving, we used for tobacco, that we're now using for mental health, the environment, other things to get society to change because human beings don't like change. And so change is really hard once we're used to a pattern of behavior. And so part of it is we have to acknowledge that yes, it is difficult to change. We have changed before and we will change again. It really is about having the right resources in order to have those changes. And so let's try this out. Tell me an issue you deeply care about. What are some of the things that you hope would change? And let's play this out. And I'll tell you about some nonprofits who are behind the scenes doing good things.
I think it's illegal in some states. I don't know what kind of trap it is, but it's the steel jaw that traps the animals. I think we need to get rid of all of those.
So, good example, because there are a number of animal charities out there who are not only doing the spay and neutering, but they also are really looking at legislation that is inhumane for animals. And we've had that for over 40 years. And so there are definitely coalitions of people who are doing that. Part of what we need is we need people like you to lend their voice. And that's why I talk about testimony as being one of the four T's, because one of the most powerful things you can do is choose a cause and go talk to your policymakers about it and consistently write them about it. Every single change that I have seen that has happened has really been a result of a couple of people who said, this isn't right. We need to do it better. And then a nonprofit gets formed, or a nonprofit takes it on, or a family decides to take it on. And honestly, that's the neat part about being in America. We actually, very early on in our origin story, Alexis de Tocqueville, he was a French philosopher, came to the United States, and he said, one of the really unique things about Americans is they're a nation of joiners. When we see a problem, we actually decide we're going to take it on. We don't let problems just bypass us. We actually are very activist in our very nature. And now it's easier than ever. You don't actually have to go to your state capitol. You can just call, email, write, video, and let your legislator know that this is something, you want to change. And so you can either do it yourself, you can donate to people who can do it. But there are lots of animal rights charities that every single year who are putting up legislation to try to fix that very problem. And, it's a remnant of our past. And it's certainly something that I think most Americans would agree that, yeah, that's not needed anymore. We don't need animal traps around anymore. Or if we do, we need to have them in controlled circumstances. So, yeah, that's a really good one. So I think the animal rights charities that we have do amazing work with very little dollars. And so I would definitely encourage people to donate to them and be part of that advocacy that is happening at a local, state, and federal level. It's different when it's personal, right? All politics is personal. I mean, and here's the thing I would say. A lot of people like to complain. Not everybody wants to raise their hand and say, I'm going to show up and I'll speak up. And so I would encourage people, the thing that they're the most passionate about, decide you're going to show up and decide you're going to speak up about it after you educate yourself about who's actually, creating traction around that particular issue.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this happens sooner than later. But what I wanted to add
Yeah.
with everything that you're talking about and saying as far as change, and we are in that society where we want it now. Some of these things take a little bit of time. And I do hear a lot of people who say, well, I'm not going to do it. Why bother? It's not going to change when I'm alive. Well, that attitude just prolongs the not change. I don't know how to put it, but so if you're passionate about something, I think that you should do it, start it now. It may
Hmm.
not be accomplished during your lifetime, or it may not be accomplished within the next month. Maybe it'll happen in a year. So don't let that time discourage you from your passion work or your philanthropy, whatever it might be.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think the way you've positioned it is really important because we do live and as this, as our phones will do this to you, our instant gratification world. And most of our social change issues, part of the reason why it takes a while is because we live in a democracy, and we've got to
Yeah.
talk to people about the issue. We've got to have hearings about the issue. We've got to get everybody's voices heard. And then there has to be legislators or policymakers who come together and choose it as a priority among all the other priorities that exist. And so I think people just forget, I remember from growing up that it's just a bill. I mean, go back and watch that commercial to see how complicated it is to just get a bill passed and then to get it signed. And so we live in a place where I think we're really lucky, but all those checks and balances are really important to make sure the right decisions get made. And so that means that it takes more time, but it also means that we get closer to, the arc of justice bending towards justice, and bending towards it. And so, as Martin Luther King would say. And so, but we've got to be part of that. We can't not vote. We can't when we see an injustice, we've got to speak up. We've got to, learn that policymakers need to hear from us. It's not just going on social media and complaining about something. You've got to actually talk to someone who can make a difference. Yeah,
Actions speak louder than
that's
words, but
right.
words are pretty powerful too. Suzanne, what specifically can you do for organizations, businesses, companies, individuals? So I don't want to forget that because there is a purpose to your madness that you're trying to help everybody. So what specifically can you do for people?
Yeah. So I think right now I'm really on this crusade to get people to open themselves up to human connection and thinking about a couple of things. One is giving back from a time perspective. And this is at an individual level, so people deciding they're going to volunteer in their community. It can also be at a business level. So one of my favorite stories is I had an individual come to one of my talks and he actually owned a chain of franchises of oil changes. And he's like, you know what? I'm not one of those big companies. I can't, give back in the same kind of way. And I really challenged him and I said, I guarantee you there is a local program nearby you that needs oil changes, and they're probably paying for them right now. And so he indeed did find an after school program that was down the street from him, literally within walking distance. They did have a van. They had to pick up kids back and forth. And so they obviously used that van. And so he donated oil changes to them. And it just started with that small act. Then over time, he's like, well, I can do more than that. Like I can get all the other folks, the people who do brakes and the people who do gas and all these friends of mine. And we will keep this van in a pristine condition. And so he got all of his friends to donate. Then he got even more involved and he realized that some of the kids actually were very interested and were thinking about what car they wanted to buy, but didn't know basic auto mechanics. Like they didn't know how to change their oil, they didn't know how to check the pressure in their tires. And so he actually taught all of the students about that. And then during the local giving day, he actually encouraged people to round up to give to the after school program. And he had pictures in his office. I recently ran into him and he now serves on the board of that after school program. And so to me, that's the kind of spark I hope to have where people recognize that, yes, it's a little bit of time, but he gets so much out of it. And he actually says that he gets greater customer retention. His employees are happier because they're not just coming in and doing any old oil change. They're working for a company that's actually giving back. So I think just encouraging people to give their time. I even encourage families to give time during the holiday season. We're in the holiday season right now. And instead of just coming up with your wish list, I encourage people to also think about how are they going to give back this holiday season. And there's a million different ways that families can give back. I encourage people who are dating to date together and give back. That's really great to date. And it actually says something about you and vice versa. out on a date and you say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something fun. We're going to go volunteer together. Great team building activity for businesses too. And then talent, we all have talents. And so trying to channel that talent, and you could be an architect, you could be an artist. I mean, you can be a baker like me, you can do whatever you want, and then you can actually find ways to give it. So in my neighborhood, like I said, there is a elderly couple and we bake twice as much because I don't like leftovers, and we take it over to that couple. And that's how we do it. And we get to know them and, check in on them and make sure they're doing okay. And it's incredibly meaningful to them that we do that. And then treasure. So the last one is treasure. And we talked about testimony. I just encourage people to find their highest streaming service, so maybe it's Netflix, maybe it's Amazon, and decide to donate that amount every single month to a charity. So set it and forget it. And if you can afford Netflix or you can afford Amazon Prime, you can absolutely afford, like Chuck, you could give to SPCA or one of the different advocacy charities specifically around that every single month. And then they know that money is coming in and it supports their policy efforts. So that's what I encourage people to do, is find these ways that they can give back. And then, practice these small moments of gratitude like we were talking about on Fridays. And it really will turn you around to recognizing there is good in the world and that you're part of creating that good. And you will see the world differently as a result. It will have an effect on you after a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's the thing is it comes back tenfold
It
almost.
does.
It makes you feel good, but it makes you feel, I'm going to use a poor word, but you hear kids say it makes you gooder, makes you feel gooder.
Well, it's
Because sometimes it does make you feel like a kid again. You get this joy.
well,
And
and they call it the helper's high for a reason. It decreases any of the effects of depression. It increases happiness. There's all the same things that you feel when you hear your favorite song, or any other thing that you do. You feel that when you're volunteering or you're giving back or you're doing something, a moment of gratitude to someone else.
yeah, definitely does. And it can be as simple as you talked about strangers. So they don't have to be your neighbor. They don't have to be a close friend. Wave to the person, say
Yes.
hi, thank you, open the
Yeah.
door. It doesn't have to be the chivalry of a man opening for a woman. Just open the door and hold the door if somebody's coming up behind you or whatever it might be. They're surprised. They feel good. And, in the back of their minds, they're going, wow, what a nice guy. What a nice gal. And if they smile back or they say thank you feel pretty good too.
That's right. No, you're so right.
But just a warning, if it's a busy restaurant and you haven't made your reservation, don't hold that door open for 10 people.
So true.
That wait of an hour is going to be 90 minutes. I also want to ask you real quick, because you do have blogs and everything as well, and you have current and trending things. So what's the latest that you're talking about on your blog, or some of the latest things that people could find when they go to your blog
I love
site?
that you asked that. So we have the top social sector blog on Substack called Social Trend Spotter. And so we talk about everything from, what are the giving trends and the fact that different generations want to give in different ways. So what are the difference between baby boomers and Gen Zers as far as giving back? We also had a series in August that was on emotional intelligence. So, how do you think about self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, as well as social influence. So we've got some really good content on there that I think a lot of people, if whether they're wanting to start a nonprofit, whether they're a business that wants to do social good, or they're just an individual that is wanting to kind of boost their social impact individually, like we're talking about, all of it would be of interest to folks.
And how can the viewers today that are watching and listening help you?
Well, I think, just giving me and kind of the feedback around what they're actually doing. To me, one person talking about, here's what my New Year's resolution is, or here's what I'm doing over the holidays to give back, and doing hashtag hope scrolling. That in of itself helps other people go, that should be part of my holiday tradition too. I should try to, give back. Or if you have a tradition, post about it, whether it's your 5 gratitude moments, your bright spots or whatever. To me, part of what I'm trying to do is create this is being kind of the new trend around giving back. And it's, the small acts of kindness, the small acts of gratitude, but it's also the big ways you can make a difference, so through your testimony and actually advocating for policy change, all of those things make a significant difference. And so I would say just kind of start the process of doing it. And then I think tagging you and tagging me, and kind of helping people realize that they can make a difference, I think would be the greatest way that you could pay it forward.
You just made me think of something that was very recent, and I'm going to throw it out because if these folks are listening, I say thank you. I play music every once in a while. Some people showed up that I have not seen or heard from in forever, and that actually made me feel good
Yeah.
that somebody came out because that shows you they're supporting something, whether it be you or whatever it is. It feels good for that support. And
No,
I think we all need that little pat on the back or that feel good moment every once in a while.
I agree. I think everybody, there's a really great quote from Mary Kay Ash, that I do in my training on social awareness. Everybody's wearing an invisible sign on the front of them saying, "Make me feel special." And it doesn't matter who that person is. They could be president of the United States, or they could be, the person who's working a front desk somewhere, and that makes a big difference to them. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it makes a huge difference to me. I hear something I said made a difference to somebody and helped them think about the world a bit differently, or they're now doing something. And to be honest, I even tell them, if you're doing it better, let me know, and then I'll imitate you. So, continuing the idea sharing, continuing the work, I think is the most important part.
Yes. Suzanne Smith. Meet Suzanne.com. This has really been good. I know a lot of this stuff that we're talking about and that you're giving information on is a lot of stuff is in the back of our heads. We kind of all know the basic tools of it, but we always need somebody to bring it to the forefront again. And I want to say thank you for doing that because we all need this constant
Mhm.
reminder of doing these things. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Not at all. I appreciate you letting me be on your show and kind of sharing, particularly in this season. I think this year has been really loud for a lot of people. And so, my hope for people is that they take a quiet moment and really choose for themselves and other people, more connection, maybe do something different, make a new thing around volunteerism or gratitude or kindness. And again, continue to choose the light, because it's out there. It's out there for all of us.
Great way to end it. Make a connection, choose the light. Suzanne, thank you very much.
Thank you.